Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Robe podcast. I am so happy to be here. Of course, my name is Anzhane Slaughter, and I'm here with my friendly co-host, Miss Carol Mitchell. How are you doing?
You're tired co-host, both
My
of us.
tired.
It's too late at night for us to be up doing this podcast, but okay.
But we committed. We committed to you viewers out there.
And we keep our commitments. That's one thing about the two of us. We
That's
do
a
keep
fact.
our commitments. That's the ethics issue for us.
That's right. And we were just so hurt that, last week's episode ran into some, we can call it technical difficulties. We can call it some hating. We can call it
Glitches.
Some glitches, a little censoring. I'm not too sure exactly what happened, guys, but I do want to let you know, if you guys are interested in our conversation around entrepreneurship and the dignity behind certain entrepreneurs, check us out on all of our audio platforms. We're on Anchor. You guys can find us there.
Episode 45. I've been sending
Episode
links
45.
to people. Yeah.
Go hear the Audible, because it was a good topic,
We're calling an audible on episode 45. Yeah, they let you introduce the show, Anjanae. We got through the music and your introduction, and then all of a sudden people could not hear anything on our Facebook that happened and on our YouTube page. And so remember, this is a podcast, so it's technically the audio that matters, but we just throw in our fine faces just for entertainment, just for entertainment and shock value. we just give you a visual to help you enjoy it.
You're silly, Carol. Shock value. Yeah, you're shocked that she's the younger one. I'm the only one, right?
No, look, I know it helps people enjoy what they're hearing more because they can see our faces, but don't forget, we do have that podcast. It's on Anchor. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify, whatever you have.
Everywhere you can find
podcast is there. But we want to talk a little bit tonight about Shaquille O'Neal, and not about basketball per se, but about a decision that his two young adults made about where they were going to go to college. You want to tell folks what happened?
Absolutely. So his youngest son, I believe, is 18 years old. His name's Shaquille O'Neal, almost a junior.
Of course.
Right. He was, like a lot of Shaq's kids, sought out at an early age for his height, for his athletic ability. So Shakir had a lot of choices for where he could have went. Some were Ivy League, that I honestly don't have the full list in front of me, so I don't want to misspeak, but I know that there were some Ivy League. And then of course there was TSU.
Hey, that's where my brother went, to TSU, Tennessee State.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, Shaquille O'Neal's son just recently committed to HBCU in Texas, which was this is a huge thing,
Is it Texas or Tennessee? I may have misspoke.
Texas Southern University.
The other TSU.
The other TSU.
Not Tennessee State. It's Texas Southern. Okay, got it. All right. And
yeah, there's probably another HBCU with the same acronym too somewhere.
Tuscaloosa State, who knows?
Exactly. Tallahassee State University. Anyways, long story short, we're seeing this huge trend, of young Black athletes. It's really athletes that are really catching the wave, or at least catching the media's attention with their college selection, right? And so when it comes to Shaq's kids, not only one but two of his kids that are both D1 athletes have chosen to go to a HBCU instead of an Ivy League school. One that some could say is more accredited, one that some could say has a better turnover rate when it comes to actually converting, Division I athletes into actual, professional athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, they're going to be in the
what's up with this
NBA.
change?
We know they're going to make it to the NBA no matter where they go. I mean,
the
come
NBA,
on.
the WNBA, one of the two. But I wanted to bring this discussion to the Black Robe because, one, I think us coming from Washington State, we should have this conversation. We don't actually have that HBCU presence here. I know I wanted to go to HBCU for undergrad. I mean, I love that I'm a Husky, go Dogs. But there is something about, just wanting to be around others that look like you that are also trying to, climb that social mobility ladder, right? And even that educational ladder. But then also, to kind of discuss and maybe undo some myths around the credibilities behind these universities, these historically Black college and universities.
Mm-hmm.
So, Carol, what are your thoughts? What's Auntie Carol thinking?
Let's see, 16. How much is 16,000 times 4? That's what we ended up
64.
That's what we had to pay because my youngest child said there was no way she was staying in Washington after growing up in a predominantly white environment. She absolutely wanted to go either south or east, but definitely to an HBCU, and would not look at anything in the state of Washington at all. And so she ended up at Lincoln University, which is, hey, Thurgood Marshall, Lorraine Hansberry, Amiri Baraka, those are names that are impressive names. And here's what she said, if it was good enough for Thurgood, how come it ain't good enough for me? I said, I cannot argue with that.
Right.
And as I mentioned earlier, one of my brothers went to Tennessee State. We've got cousins and family members who are Morehouse men and Dillard, because they are from the South. And so those institutions are held in extremely high regard and not necessarily easy for them to get into. Very high standards, like for my cousin to get into Morehouse, that took some doing.
Yeah.
You have people like Martin Luther King who went to Morehouse. So that ought to tell you that the academic level, the academic standards are high, because you don't have somebody with that kind of stature and status coming out of a school that doesn't, that isn't top notch.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece that, and Carolyn, my youngest daughter, did great at Lincoln. Of course, she came home with a husband and a child, but
see, maybe that is all I needed then, huh? I just needed to go to HBCU. I could have got me a husband,
Listen, that was not the plan. She was supposed to go get a degree, not my son-in-law. But anyway, I love him and love my grandchildren that came out of that union. Yeah. But what she discovered is that she was totally unprepared culturally for, even though, we have a big old Black family, and they were raised in a Black church and spent a lot of time being indoctrinated into Black liberation theology and all of that. But when she got out there and had to interact with young Black folk from, very different economic circumstances in some cases, and DC and Maryland, they're coming out of Baltimore, they're coming out of Philadelphia. It's the intensity of it was tough on her initially, because she just wasn't prepared for it.
Yeah.
Not all Black is Black. That's
a fact. And I think, it's it's just, you won't know that until you know it, until you're around, engulfed in the culture, and just, you know, centered around nothing but, I mean, not nothing, but, you know, predominantly Black people. You're able to then see, wow, like, just because I watch anime doesn't mean I'm not Black. Just because I wear Birkenstocks doesn't mean that I'm not Black, right?
Girl,
Just because I like to play water polo.
Yeah. No, the Doc Martin shoes she was wearing, that caused her all kinds of grief.
She got her black card revoked.
She got her black card revoked with those Birkenstock shoes and those Doc Martens.
That's just boots. All of us out here. That's all of our Pacific Northwestern folks.
It was in those days, but it was like, those young people said, no, Carolyn, you got to redo that one. That's a redo.
Yeah.
And she had spent, you know, we had saved so that she would have money to go and come out without a ton of debt. But, you know, she had to go redo her wardrobe real quick.
I bet. That's funny. I'm taking my birth. So I said, you know, I didn't go to HBCU, grad school, you know, still out there, law school, still on the horizon for me. So,
hey, look at our vice president. She's an HBCU, you know, Howard University. And the other thing that you have at HBCUs that you don't have at a lot of other, you know, schools on the West Coast is you have Black fraternities and sororities. And that's that is a whole cultural phenomena in and of itself.
Yeah. See, we are
marching band.
It's so sad, the battle of the bands. I mean, this was the college experience that I would have died for. But, you know, the reason why I didn't, and I think, you know, maybe a lot of other people too, is because of that financial burden. I didn't go to Howard. I got into Howard. I didn't go because they were asking me for $25,000 a year. And then, you know, after 4 years, wow, that's $100,000 in debt. You compare that to this full ride academic scholarship that University of Washington's offering. You think my single parent mother was going to let me turn that down?
No. Absolutely not. And you're not talking about a school that's some, you know, slouch number 54 on the list. You know, you're talking about a nationally recognized top tier state school. And so where you got a world-class education.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
So somehow we have to figure it out, you know, so students like you and my daughter can go, because I know there are a lot of young people who would go to HBCUs, but who don't because the family contribution is out of reach for them. Did you see that some of the HBCUs are going to cancel? Was it Howard that is going to cancel the outstanding debt of their juniors and seniors?
I did see that.
For families that have a zero you know, where the family is not expected to make a contribution. And part of the discussion around it was, well, what about families that do make, like, you know, a $10,000, let's say, contribution to their child's education? Those are the families that, how about having that debt canceled, because it's usually parents that are carrying that debt for their young people. But yeah, Howard's going to cancel debt, outstanding student debt. So
I heard about that. And Howard's an interesting case because I've also heard stories from people that were going to Howard, you know, that the financial aid money ran out and they weren't able to cover their, you know, like there has been scandals. And I don't mean to say this to, you know, speak on, you know, Howard at all. Like Howard gets a lot of credit for being the first. I believe the sororities, like they started at Howard, AKA
it's one of the oldest.
One of the oldest, yeah.
HBCUs.
Mm-hmm. So not to say anything about, how they operate or run their business, but I have heard that there's also been shortages in their financial aid packages. So I think, at the end of the day, we need to get more money to these schools. Like that's what we need.
You're seeing that happening from philanthropy, that is not necessarily Black philanthropy, but a lot of it is. They're starting to put money into HBCUs. The United Negro College Fund is not the only source anymore. There are wealthy Black folk who went to those schools who are setting up endowments and providing funding too, because I think that's part of the answer as well. That, alumni, we all need to do our part to set up funding that would allow a broader base of young people to go to an HBCU if they choose to.
Yeah, and also maybe to even have satellite locations. When I was at UW, they had an exchange program, but not many of the exchange program or schools that were compatible where you could actually receive, UW credit, but be taking classes in another institution out of state or even out the country. A lot of them weren't HBCUs. So, to just have more accessibility, to be able to get that experience. Because even if I could have got that experience for 6 months, for a quarter.
A summer program or something, if you could go to, but you probably wouldn't want to be at
Spelman. I wouldn't want to come back.
It's
be
hot.
Like, I don't know. My husband's out here.
PLU has that great J term, right? Where the month of January, you're basically out of school to go do something somewhere else.
Oh, wow.
Even if you did a term like that somewhere else at some other school, it can all be done. I was talking about this with our president at Clover Park Technical College about maybe looking for an opportunity to have an international relationship with, a school and exchanging students, for a couple weeks or whatever. We've been doing that. Yeah. High schools have been doing it. And colleges have been doing that for years, but it seems as if, for me, what matters is having the experience, but for the colleges, it's about the money. It's about the dollarini, right? Like you said, if the financial aid doesn't cover it, then, you just don't get to do it. Palmer Scholars, when I was on their board, they put in the scholarship that travel was something that could be covered by the Palmer Scholarship, so that young people who may not otherwise ever get to do some sort of study abroad could use their scholarship money for that purpose, because it's about having that experience. And there's learning that happens in travel. You said this.
Oh yeah. So much value in travel. And especially, that's what we're talking about right now. When you're growing up on this side of the country, and even this corner of the country, because it looks completely different if you grow up in Inglewood or Compton, even in the most wealthiest areas of California, you can even find some Black people more than maybe.
I'm jealous of my cousins that all got to go to HBCUs.
I'm so jealous.
They went to Dillard and, Alabama State and all, and the ones that went to Morehouse or Fort Valley or wherever, those schools were right there in their backyard, right? Spelman and Morehouse were in their backyard, and for me, that would have been a cross-country trip.
I know,
and I don't know why we can't have an HBCU on the West Coast. Why not?
Exactly. Even if it's just, like I said, a satellite school, right? So if it was still, I don't know if we could say historically Black. We can't just create a Washington University. Well, we already have that.
Why not?
I don't know. Do you think?
Yeah. The problem is the problem is that historically, that word, yeah, it was just now coming online. But if it's a satellite of a
right. So like
historically
if we had a
Black college,
Howard but Seattle campus or a Howard Tacoma campus,
why
I
not?
think even people from, I mean, why wouldn't they? If they knew that they could get credit and be able to see what the Pacific Northwest looks like and maybe interview at Microsoft, you know, you're right here and, you know, get a great job with Amazon straight out of school or whatever, right?
Yeah,
there's a benefit in both exchanges.
Your original point, though, is the one, you know, that I'm kind of thinking about, and that is the perception, because you know, I have family, grandchildren, and so forth that chose the Ivy League path, and friends and so forth who chose, their children chose the Ivy League path, and so, you know, they leveraged that, their Blackness, you know, is part of not only their academics, but their Blackness was one of the things that was a factor in getting in. Well, that's not a factor. That's not something in high demand at the HBCUs. There's plenty of Black folks there. So the people who get the scholarships are the ones who aren't Black.
Well, then, yeah, I don't know.
So, you know, it's all about, I think all of the universities are trying to create an, you know, an artificial little microcosm of the real world, which, as you saw in the census results, is getting browner and browner, more multiracial, more multilingual than ever. And so the universities are trying to reflect that in historically Black colleges. I guess you'd have to ask, you know, what role will they play in that regard as the population gets browner and the money puts pressure on them to broaden who they recruit? Then you might start to see Howard might start looking like Harvard.
But I don't know. You also said that there are some wealthy Black people that have been putting into these alumni associations. Of course,
yeah. Right? And then Oprah has a bunch of Morehouse men that she funded.
I bet she does. But
no, I mean, you know, she has some sort of an endowment at Morehouse for, you know, I don't know, like 25 or 30 students a year, something wild. Wow.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
and more endorsement. I think more athletes will bring more money to those schools, you know, especially once those athletes start to become professional ball players. You know, they'll bring people, and they'll bring new athletes. They'll bring the next generation of D1 players because, oh, Shaq's son just you know, he played here, and you know, this LeBron's son also came here, and you know, somebody else's kid, right? Will Smith's daughter came, you know. But we also starting to see like Felicia Rashad is now one of the deans of arts at Howard University, you know, so people that want to, you know, make these true, strong connections, you know, they'll just maybe see it as a mean to an end, or, you know, they'll start going to those schools based off of their lineage and not necessarily, you know, because Connecticut, you know, has won the last.
Yeah, I mean, some of these, I'm sure some of the athletes and some of their families, like if you're Shaquille O'Neal's son, you're probably going to go to the NBA, or his daughter, you know, because he got like 5 kids or something, right? 5 or 6. You can, your odds are pretty good that you'll get in. Some team will sign you, even if it's initially second string. But a lot of these young athletes, now that they can be paid for their likeness, and they can do endorsements, and you know,
they can do the endorsements at the HBCUs too, right?
Well, that's the question. Will they get the same kind of exposure? Like if you're going to play for a Michigan State, right? schools, or a Duke, let's say a Duke
I do.
University that has his years and hundreds of years worth of presence of producing top-notch college athletes. Do you go to Duke or do you go to Texas Southern? I don't know. Because in terms of your ability to leverage your college years to make money, which you can now do, sometimes it's an economic decision. For Shaq's kids, it probably doesn't matter because daddy got so much money. But for the average young person whose family may not be able to afford college, and that child could be making money.
I know. At some point, and it's hard to say this when you're not already financially secured. I'm not financially secured, so I just want to preface my statement with that. But at some point, we do have to make the cultural decisions, over the economic decisions, and it's hard to say that again if you're not economically sustained,
I mean, you could even say that locally, right? Do you send your child to a private school, college prep school, or do you keep them in the neighborhood school in the hood where it's
that's
more
not an
diverse?
HBCU, a neighborhood school in the hood. I don't know if that. Come on, Carol.
I'm just saying, where there's a lot more diversity culturally, do you keep them, close to those cultural roots, or do you, if they can get a scholarship to go to some private prep school that kind of sets them up for life? What do? I mean, that's a decision that a lot of parents, especially parents of athletes, have to make locally.
Yeah.
Right? And I saw students switching schools, at the end of their 8th or 9th grade year, they switch schools to go to a school where they can get that exposure, that athletic exposure. And, it's paid for by somebody else.
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic, and I think that we should maybe save room to discuss it further, because it's not something that I think we can just come up with an answer, just now. I know that these are definitely some valuable and costly decisions that we have to face. One thing that I do want any young high schooler that's out there, to not be discouraged by the cost of the HBCUs to deter you from applying to them or to visiting them. I mean, I'm sure we've all heard the saying.
Maybe your debt will all be forgiven someday. I keep hoping.
Or it'll just be worth it.
And you're gonna, in many cases, unless you get really fortunate and get a full ride, you're gonna have some debt no matter where you go. Usually, unless you get Pell Grants and lots of other support. But that as long as that investment at some point you get the return on that investment, then sometimes you have to, it's like buying your house, right?
Yeah, you gotta pay it off.
Costs a lot up front, but at the back end, when you start to see that return on investment and that equity that flows back, same thing happens with a good education.
Oh yeah, the connections that you can make. I mean, the network, especially just being in that environment. I cannot express it enough. I, went to UW, which I think is the best school in Washington State,
Agreed.
Agreed. But, I was one of 5, I think, at the most, Black kids in my class. And the 5 was in the class of over 100 people. When it was a smaller class of 30, I was one of 2. I mean, and if you're from Washington, then you're probably also familiar with feeling that way. And so if you don't want to feel like that and you want to also be around other young Black people that are working to, educate themselves and to just grow as individuals, I would say there's a lot to offer, at HBCUs. The culture and the history that's embedded in those institutions, you might even have more of a wealth of classes around culture. At UW, there was like one African American studies class,
Mm-hmm.
At Howard, I mean, it's probably you can.
I don't think you have to worry
major in
about
African American studies at UW too, but.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a good program at UPS as well, but I don't think you have to worry about folks fussing about critical race theory at an HBCU.
Nope, I bet not. Seriously, people before going to Howard probably know.
I think you can wear your hair in braids and ain't nobody gonna say anything about it.
I bet your professor, one of them's gonna look like you.
Many of them will look like you, which to me is also part of the value. The fact that you see college professors, college presidents, professional Deans. Folks in those roles, coaches and so forth, that some of whom have come out of their own difficult circumstances and made it there. Right. And, you see those mentors and those role models. It's a natural place to find good mentors and role models that are really hard to find at a UW.
Exactly.
That was a tough, I still don't. I think my mentor at the UW was an old white man in the Jackson School of International Studies. And I loved him. He was great. But hey, would I have preferred to have a woman who had a similar cultural background? Yeah, but wasn't available.
Nope.
That's because I thought I was going to study Chinese history. That was my first undergraduate choice.
I did not know that. That was your what?
Yeah.
You must have been thinking about, I don't know what you're thinking about, some trade and business.
I do not know what I was thinking, but when I realized I could graduate a whole semester early if I majored in sociology, I switched that real quick.
Real quick.
Anyway, well, this is a good topic. I definitely think that Shaquille O'Neal's children probably could have gone anywhere they wanted to. So to make the choice.
They chose a HBCU.
Yeah, that says a lot. That says a lot for, how they feel about the value of an education at an HBCU.
And it's not just his kids. Other athletes that are D1s, are also following this wave that, who knows, could have a lasting effect, right? Who knows, could trickle down to the endorsement policies that HBCUs have to follow, which will also maybe incentivize other athletes to, go there, and indirectly the students as well. Because when the teams are winning, the students want to be a part of those winning teams.
The sports are a huge source of recruiting.
Yeah.
People like being at a school that has a winning team. Don't nobody want to be at the school that's always losing.
No, exactly. That's why I didn't go to Wazoo. It's like,
wait, now they're pretty good in football.
Not compared to us. Like I don't know what it is, but it's always a rivalry.
You better not say that in front of Xavier Cooper.
Oh, he knows. I think I might have mentioned it already.
He got drafted before he finished college. That's how good he was over at WSU. Well, he's got it like that. But anyway, my dear, thank you so much for tonight. I hope people can find our podcast in the event that episode 46 runs into some sort of technical difficulty or whatever they called it. You can always find us on any of the podcast platforms. So Black Robe Podcast, this is episode 46. Please go listen to episode 45 and let us know you heard it and liked it, because it was juicy.
It was very juicy. Alrighty, well, with that, we're going to close out for the night, but we'll be back next week with more on the Black Robe Podcast. All right. Have a good night.